Hello, it's Patrick, Brain Love Health again, and today I want to go over some points that I think will be very supportive in your understanding of the process we always talk about, how to prevent dementia. Over the last few weeks, we've been doing some live presentations and YouTube videos discussing what we believe to be the root cause of the problem. We believe the root cause is a manifestation of the HPG axis, the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis. Now, as we've described many of these things over the last months and actually years, questions keep coming up because I know it's confusing. Most people aren't used to talking about the endocrine system and its relationship to the brain and what effect it might have on neurons and dementia. I realize it's a very complex topic, so I continually try to educate and get more information to you so you understand what the underlying process is, the root cause. Now at Brain Love Health, we have a tendency and a focus and a mission to try to identify the root cause of dementia because we believe it's the only way in which we're going to be able to solve the problem. We don't believe that trying to find some pharmaceutical magic pill or magic infusion is going to do the job. As a matter of fact, for the last 35 years, it hasn't done anything. There's been nothing that's been brought to market that's been helpful to treat the symptoms or treat the problem associated with Alzheimer's disease and dementia. Now, I would like to mention this morning that my comments, my remarks, my observations are primarily focused on the most prevalent form of dementia, that is Alzheimer's disease. Currently in the world, we probably have close to 35 million people that suffer with Alzheimer's disease. We have over 6 million people in the United States that suffer with Alzheimer's disease, and we anticipate that that's going to triple over the next 20 years. So it's a massive problem that needs to have some solutions. We believe that prevention of the symptoms and problems associated with dementia are the only way to treat it. We don't believe there's going to be anything developed in the near term or even in the long-term future. I'm very aware of what's in the pipeline pharmaceutically, and we don't see anything that's going to be helpful. So let's talk about some of the issues that come up. I always talk about the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, the HPG axis. I also always talk about the fact that women get dementia twice as often as men. Now that's something that is very peculiar. What is it about women that get the disease twice as much as men? Now I get questions all the time and comments from people saying, well, my uncle had it and how, that has nothing to do with hormones and so on. Last week we talked about the fact that there's certain issues related to the process that leads to dementia. The root cause in our mind, and also this has been researched for many years, is a dysregulation in the HPG axis. The HPG axis is that hormonal system that drives reproduction, growth, development, and reproduction. And it's different in men and women. Now, I've said this many times before. You know that men and women are different, okay? We know they're different hormonally. We know they're different physically. We know there's differences between men and women. That's related to the endocrine system and the HPG axis. I always hear from people when I bring up the fact that women have the disease more than men. Why is that? The reason for it is because there's a disruption at the point of menopause that creates a dysregulation in the hormonal feedback system that has your brain talking to your ovaries and your ovaries talking to your brain. When that system gets disrupted, it leads to the downward spiral and cascade that ultimately leads to dementia. Now, what's different about men and women in the HPG axis? It's very specific. Women go through hormonal changes at menopause much more abruptly than men go through hormonal changes as in andropause or male menopause. That is, women reach the point where their HPG axis gets dysregulated at around their mid-40s. And ultimately, by their mid-50s, they've gone through menopause. And the average age of menopause is 51. But the change in the hormonal system in the HPG axis is more abrupt in women. It's more like a cliff in terms of the hormonal changes that occur. Now, it does occur over, say, 5-6 years, but it's much more abrupt than it is in men. In men, their hormonal changes begin to start in their mid-30s and 40s, but it's very gradual. And men still have testosterone in their 60s and 70s and even their 80s. It's a much lower level than it was in their 20s and 30s, but they still have the testosterone. It's the lack of estrogen at menopause feeding back to the brain, which is causing a prevalence in dementia in women. It's the lack of testosterone in men over time that will lead to the problems associated with dementia. But the point here is the difference between menopause and male menopause is significant. And that's the point in which the downward cascade of events starts to lead to the brain deterioration that will ultimately lead to dementia and Alzheimer's disease in your 60s and 70s. Now, this process is not related to, although not directly, in some ways indirectly, to the other forms of dementia. For instance, frontal lobe dementia, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's disease dementia. Those are all related in some way to things we can do to help prevent them. But the specific thing I'm talking about today is the deterioration that occurs at menopause and andropause that leads to dementia. Now, last week I talked about some issues that were related to the fact of risk factors. The major risk factors that not just related to being a woman, but risk factors related to other issues that dysregulate the HPG axis. Let's talk about the first one. We know from the scientific literature, and this is prevalent. I mean, this literature has been studied for many years, that hysterectomies and oophorectomies, that is having your uterus removed and your ovaries removed, increases your risk significantly. I believe the studies increases your risk up to 35%. Now, that's a significant thing, and I know that's not something that was discussed at you at the time you were going through your consultation about hysterectomy and oophorectomy. But let's talk about that. If in fact the dysregulation that leads to the dementia process is related to menopause, which is, again, the decrease in estrogen as it relates to the HPG axis, you trigger that same event at the point in which you have a hysterectomy or have your ovaries removed. You've basically gone through surgical menopause. Let that sink in. If the root cause is the hormonal dysregulation that's occurring as your HPG axis changes in your midlife at menopause, if you induce surgical menopause to that equation, that's the point in which you start the timeline leading to dementia and the cascade of events leading to dementia. So you've essentially increased your risk by those things. Now, people ask us all the time, why are you telling us this? Why are you scaring us? I've already had this happen to me, so what can I do about it? We tell you those things not to scare you. We tell you those things so you can take steps to prevent the problem from occurring. That is, slow down the cascade of events that ultimately lead to dementia. That's why we tell you this stuff. Now, there's a body of information out there that suggests things like nutrition, exercise, better sleep will bring down that risk factor. So that's why we tell you, so you can do something about it. We don't do this because we want to scare anybody. We do it to give you information so you can take steps that will help you keep your brain healthy long term. Another thing we brought up was the fact that studies are starting to show that when you start to take birth control pills, that has a higher risk down the road relative to dementia. Now, why is that? Well, because birth control pills completely disrupt the HPG axis. They block the production of progesterone. They block the things that are making you ovulate, so to speak. And consequently, you are manipulating the HPG axis at the point in which you start to take birth control pills. Now, once again, we're not telling you this to scare anybody. What we're telling you to do is to motivate you to take the steps necessary to help prevent dementia down the road. The other question I always get is, oh, so I guess because it has to do with the HPG axis and that all women go through menopause, that all women will get dementia. No, that's not what we're saying at all. What we're saying is it increases your risk significantly. If you're a woman, you have twice as likely high chance to get dementia and Alzheimer's disease. If you're a woman and you had a hysterectomy and an oophorectomy, you have a higher risk of getting dementia and Alzheimer's disease. If you took birth control pills, you have a higher risk. Now, this isn't to scare anybody. It's just to let you know that statistically speaking, you are increasing your risk by those events. That's why we tell you these things. Okay, so what can we do about it? That's the main point. The main point is Brain Love Health has been studying this problem now for over 20 years. We've done clinical research, we've done human studies, we've poured through the data relative to nutrition and its effect on health and aging in depth. We look at this every day. We have for many, many years. We've invested significant amounts of personal money in the research of this topic. And consequently, we've come up with things that we believe will help you keep your brain healthier longer. And they have to do with the right nutrients. They have to do with exercise and movement and getting yourself outside. Just to move your body around, walk. Those are two big issues. And then the third number one thing that really is a significant risk factor is poor sleep. Now, one of the things we realize, and the studies back up the fact that poor sleep in your 40s and 50s and 60s will contribute significantly to a higher risk in your 70s and 80s. Those are facts. Those are science. You can look that up. You can Google those topics and you will get a myriad of different papers that talk about this subject. But it relates back to the HPG axis. Now, what's going on with sleep? As the HPG axis becomes dysregulated at the point in which you have menopause or in menopause, what are some of the symptoms that you start to experience? Now, I know you all know this if you've gone through the process. Hot flashes, weight gain, moodiness, poor sleep. Poor sleep is the number one complaint I hear from women as they're going through menopause or postmenopausal. What's causing poor sleep? What's causing poor sleep is this system also affects other parts of your hormonal endocrine system. It affects the production of melatonin in your brain. It reduces the ability of melatonin to be secreted at the levels it had been when you're younger. Those are facts. Melatonin goes down as you age, and it accelerates completely when you get to the point of menopause. Another problem, and melatonin, by the way, is the sleep hormone. Melatonin is the hormone that coordinates with your circadian rhythms. Your circadian rhythms are driven by the light-dark cycles of the day and night, and that's what increases the melatonin. But when you don't have the ability to produce the melatonin, you have an inability to go to sleep effectively. Now, the other thing that affects your sleep patterns is when the HPG axis gets dysregulated, it also affects the adrenal glands, which basically is where your cortisol is secreted. Cortisol is the hormone that's secreted when you're stressed out, when you're under a lot of undue stress. That's cortisol. You've all heard that probably before. But cortisol is also the hormone that wakes you up in the morning. So the melatonin helps put you to sleep, and then the cortisol gets secreted in the morning as the light starts to emerge in the day, and your circadian rhythms stimulate the production of cortisol. That's what wakes you up. The problem you have at menopause and postmenopause is the melatonin's going down and the cortisol is going up. Therefore, you have the inability to go to sleep, but if you go to sleep, you have problems staying asleep. Now, who's heard that before? I can't go to sleep, but when I go to sleep, I keep waking up. I wake up at 2 a.m., I wake up at 3 a.m., I wake up all the time, and then I can't get back to sleep. I hear that problem day in and day out. It's the effect of these hormonal changes which are driving the process. Now, what can we do about all this? That's the number one issue. What can we do about this? Again, I want to get back to, we've got to find ways to get you better nutrients. That's what Brain Love Health does. And there's other companies out there that are trying to provide you with the same kind of nutrients. We want you to start moving, exercising. Get outside, go do some yoga, do something to keep your body moving and active and get your blood circulation. You know, we need oxygenation through our blood to keep it happy. Now, we also know that better sleep is going to be a major issue relative to keeping your brain healthy. Those three issues, if you were to take them into consideration, would reduce your risk by 50 to 70% in your 70s and 80s. Those three. So let's focus on those three. Brain Love Health has developed and is continuing to develop nutrients that have been shown around the world to help give you the brain nutrients you need. And the most important part of our formulations and what we've discovered is we bring you nutrients that not just keep you healthy because of the omega-3s and the different antioxidants and the anti-inflammatories, but we also add in ingredients that balance out the hormonal dysfunction that occurs at menopause and andropause as well. We will lower the peaks and valley of the hormonal changes, which will have a significant impact on your sugar balance, on your sleep, on your brain health, inflammation, on your oxidative stress in your brain, and yes, it will also affect the proliferation and buildup of beta amyloid plaques and tau phosphorylated proteins, which cause tangles. All these things can help to contribute to prevent those problems down the road. Now, we stress this so strongly because waiting till the symptoms occur in your 70s and 80s, it's too late. We already know, and you've seen, that the scientific and the pharmaceutical community has not brought anything that's going to help you once you have the symptoms. This is a prevention issue. Prevention is the cure for dementia and Alzheimer's disease. I can't make that point strong enough. And I don't do these and say these things to give fear to anybody. What I say them to do is to motivate you to take a stand and start taking care of yourself now. You can't wait. It needs to be done. Thank you very much. I look forward to speaking with you next time.